welcome back to another video. This week, once again, it's been a little bit grey outside. It's not even that interesting kind of dramatic grey. So we're going to dive into Lightroom. We're going to edit an internal photo, a kind of photo of a room. You'll see, we'll get into it. You know what? Let's just roll the intro. It's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where each and every Tuesday we bring you a brand new, fresh photography tutorial. This week, like I say, we're going to edit an internal photo of a space, of a room, right? How would we approach it? What are we going to do to the photo? How do we get it to look the best it can look? I'm going to go into a little bit about how I shot this photo, what we're trying to achieve, and then we're going to go ahead and do some editing. Let's dive in to Lightroom and get started. We're looking at this photo. So this was my home office. This is actually, to be honest with you, I get bored and I change things up quite a lot. This is a 2 or 3 home offices ago, something like that. But, you know, it was a really nice space to do this kind of stuff. A lot of these videos have been shot in that exact space. And I've done some deliberate things when it comes to the actual photo itself. So the way that I've lit the room is with quite a few different lights positioned around the room, all with white light, right, to mimic the daylight. So we've got the same kind of color temperature for the light throughout the entire room. Obviously, we've got lighter and darker spots. Now, in a perfect world, I probably would have bracketed this, so shot at different exposures, which I could then merge together into one kind of HDR shot, but I didn't do that. So we're gonna approach this from the perspective of only having this one photo. How would we make this work the best for us? Now, of course, like I say, it's just a lot easier if you take a lot of those steps to begin with. So things like the color temperature is really important, because if you have an external window like this with daylight coming in and then you have a different color temperature for the kind of light inside, the white balance is going to get a little bit more difficult to balance correctly. So that's why I chose to do it like this. It also just matches with the kind of the feel and the vibe of the room. So the few things we were going to do kind of first up. First of all, this was shot with an ISO of 3200. And if we zoom in somewhere like here, for example, you can see there is a little bit of noise within the photo. So we're going to want to address that, which Lightroom makes very easy. And then we're going to kind of work with what we've got here. Let's deal with the noise. So we can come to this detail panel, and actually within Lightroom now, we can just click on the denoise button here. So this uses AI to work out the best way to denoise the photo, and it actually does a really good job. So if we look at this, it actually gives us a little preview. If I click on it, you can see how the noise is without the enhancement, and then with, it's a pretty significant difference. So we're gonna go ahead and click enhance. That's gonna do it kind of in the background. We're gonna get a new file. Okay, so we've got the new file just here. This is now a newly named file, enhanced NR, added to the end of the file name. And this is now much cleaner. Look at that. This is much, much cleaner. You'll love to see it. So now we can go ahead and actually start editing the photo the way we want it to be. Now, first up, you know, we've got a lot of light coming in from this window, so that's a little bit blown out. And then there's some darker areas within the room. So the exposure is probably one of the first things I'm going to look to address, along with the overall white balance. Now, I think there's a little bit too much magenta in the image, so I'm going to just bring the green down a touch, just to bring the tint over towards the green, sorry. We're also going to just cool this just a little bit. And the reason is I think it just leans into this kind of very clean, minimalist feel we've got to this photo. I think a nice, cool white balance is actually going to work really well. So very minor difference there, but I think that really just does help. Now I'm going to start by bringing the exposure up a little bit, but I have a feeling we're actually going to end up coming back to that and bringing it back down. Let's see if that ends up being correct. The highlights I'm going to bring down a bit as well. And the shadows I'm going to bring up. I just want to even this out a little bit. I might even just reduce the contrast a tiny amount, something like that. Now the clarity I'm going to bring up as well as the texture. And you know what? I might just bring the vibrance up a touch and the saturation down a little bit, but we're going to go into the HSL sliders to actually actively change some of the individual colors. Let's come down here. We are going to deal with some masking in that window and things like that in a moment. But first up, what I want to do is actually bring the green saturation down. I just find that these plants are a little bit overpowering. Might just bring the yellow down as well. Let's go into the hue sliders here. I'm going to bring the orange down towards a kind of more burnt orange a little bit, and the yellows that way as well. And that's going to help warm up this wood to give us a nice kind of color contrast with the rest of the room. The wood pops a little bit more, has this kind of slightly richer feel, which I really like. We're also just going to bring the blue slightly towards the aqua and the aqua slightly towards the blue, just to marry those up a tiny bit. But otherwise, I think that is actually looking pretty good. I'm not going to go for any color grading at the moment with regards to adding colors to things like the shadows, the highlights, or the midtones. But I might come right down to the bottom. We're going to leave all of this, just come to calibration here. I'm going to bring the red primary over towards the orange and the blue primary over towards the teal. I think that this photo probably works with a slight orange and teal feel to it. And I think this is looking really nice. The beauty of this is we might come back and actually edit some of these. Again, we might change some of these values if they're not really working for us. Great, so let's come up here. We need to now deal with some of the exposure within the photo. We're gonna go into the masking panel. The first thing I'm gonna do is go for a radial gradient. I'm just gonna pop this over this window, and I'm gonna immediately just bring the exposure down, bring the highlights down a little bit as well. Don't wanna go too crazy with it. I'm actually someone who likes a little bit of, not a blown out window in this case, but you know, we've got some detail, we've got the tree behind, but it's a window, right? It is gonna be quite bright. And actually, if you go too far with it, right, we could bring the exposure down, you get a lot of detail back out there, but it starts to look not ideal. Now we could do it a lot better than that, but it can start to look a little bit, you know, a little bit too over edited. So I don't think that that's the worst thing ever. You can see that there's a nice tree out there. You've got enough detail, but it's a bright sunny day out there, right? So we want to have a little bit of maybe a little bit of an overexposure out there. I don't mind that personally. I quite like the look of it. So, okay, great. Next, we're going to do another new mask. I'm actually going to just lighten this side of the room. So something like this, a linear gradient and just a little bit of a bump up in exposure. Nothing too crazy. In fact, I might go for something like that. And that's just because this side of the room is looking a little bit darker. You know, understandably, the window is on the other side, right? But we want to kind of even this out a little bit. Great. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and do a radial gradient in the middle of the room, something like this. I'm actually going to just bump that exposure up as well. So we've got this nice kind of bright feel to the room. Another mask here, we're going to go for a brush. This time, before I even brush anything, I'm going to just up the exposure here. We've got a 50% flow, which I really like. Let's go ahead and just brush on some of this area, stuff like this, just where I think it could do with a little bump up in exposure. So we're going to do something like this. That's looking pretty good. I'm just going to do some of this chair. And we can always adjust this value a little bit just to brighten some of these darker areas which are perhaps feeling a little bit too dark. Stuff like that. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now, if you remember, I said that we're probably going to come back to this overall exposure slider. I've brought that up. I'm actually going to bring that back down. I think that now the photo is looking too bright. But it helped, I think, initially with being able to see where I wanted to get to. So I think that that is a pretty nice area to be at. Let's look at it before and after. So if I press the backslash key on the keyboard, this is what the photo looked like originally. This was just the straight up raw photo, although admittedly with the noise reduction. This is where we've got it to, right? So we've really brightened up a lot of the photo, a lot of those darker areas. We've adjusted some of the colors, not in a big way, but it's enough to make a little bit of a difference. And we've got this very nice, clean, kind of modern, you know, a bit techie feel to the image, which I actually really like. Now, there's some more bits we could do to this, absolutely. What I might actually go in and do, let's see what this looks like with a big radial gradient, something like this, right in the middle. Let's go ahead and invert that. And then just bring the exposure down. So we're just giving a little bit of a vignette to the image. That's going to be personal choice. That's a subjective thing. I think that it kind of works, if I'm honest, with this photo. Before, after, I quite like it. Let's leave it in for now. We can always take it out later if we want to. What we might want to do is clean up some of the areas of the room that I obviously missed when I was taking this photo. First up, we might want to get rid of the reflection on the TV here. Now we can do that really easily in Lightroom now. We just go into the remove tool here. We're going to use generative AI. We want that ticked on. What I'm going to do is hold spacebar, click to zoom in. I'm going to use the mouse scroll wheel to make the cursor a little bit bigger. And what I want to do is just try and cover as much of this reflection as I can. I'm actually just going to just make it so it's not touching the edges. There we go. And not on there as well. Right, let's see how we feel about that. I'll just, do you know what? I will just grab that bit of reflection. Let's click remove, and Lightroom is going to use generative AI to fill in those areas, right? Hopefully, we don't really have much control over it. Perfect. Hopefully it's going to do that. It's exactly what I was going to say. That is absolutely ideal. Let's just look at the variations. 3. So I think that looks pretty good. We've just got a very slight reflection. You know what? I think that looks pretty good. If we zoom out, look at that. I think that just helps. I think we wanted to get rid of that reflection maybe. And maybe you don't. Maybe you want to have the reflection in there. Maybe it looks more real to you, but I like the option to be able to take that out. And that's really what we're exploring here, is all of the different tools at our disposal to make this work for us. Okay, next up, I'm going to click in here. Let's get rid of some of these wires. We're going to do the exact same thing. So I'm going to use generative AI. I'm just going to select these like so. Now, what's great about this is I can let go just like that and then continue the mask again. So we're going to do that just to tidy this up, right? Because we can. And actually, what I should have done is either moved the chair to hide them slightly or just tidied them up, really would have been ideal. If I was taking this photo again, I think that looks pretty good. Let's just double check with the different variations. I think that looks pretty nice. Yeah, look at that. Great. So that's nice and tidy. And then we could do the same thing down here. So let's go ahead and grab that remove tool one more time. We might want to just expand the size of it. There we go. Just going to grab that. And this is great, you know, for wires, but also just for any areas that you just missed, right? Sometimes you spend ages tidying a room. You know, I noticed this little bit over here as well, and you just miss something. And this is a great way of just tidying that up. Now, I wouldn't use it to hide things that are a permanent fixture, right? So I'm not trying to lie, I guess, about the way the room looks, but, you know, to hide some wires, to hide something that I should have just tidied up. Actually, this is a useful tool to just clean that up, right? Just to clean what's left of the room. Great, look at that. So we've got the wires are gone. I'm going to leave these wires in because I think that that's a little bit more genuine and they're quite tidy anyway. But if I come out of the remove tool here, look at that. That is looking really, really tidy. It's looking really good. I'm a big fan, actually. So the last thing we could do here is try and adjust the perspective a little bit. We could do it manually. So down here in the transform tool, we've got all these different sliders, right, which adjust things like the vertical perspective, the horizontal perspective, stuff like this, right? So we could just maybe go for something like that. The problem is we've got a lot of different straight lines that we might be trying to line up. The one I'm kind of focused in on is this corner in the background. But if I was to get that straight, for example, it's going to look something like that, which just doesn't look correct for the room. If I'm honest, we might even just be better off just kind of leaving things not too played around with when it comes to this perspective. We also then have to zoom in a little bit, which is not the end of the world, but, you know, maybe that looks better. It's a difficult one to judge. Yeah, maybe that looks a little bit better. So do you know what? I'm going to go with that. I do think that perspective is maybe a little bit corrected. It's going to be subjective. It's going to be personal preference. And again, it's something in an ideal world that you just get right in camera when you take the photo. It's something that is much easier to deal with then than it is later, especially with a wide angle lens like this one. Now, okay, let's do a final before and after. So this was where the photo started. Again, not bad, lit pretty well actually to give us that kind of feeling we want to go for. Again, ideally I would have bracketed it, but I didn't. And then this is where we've ended up, which I think looks pretty good. We could maybe boost the shadows just a touch more to give us that really nice, bright, clean feel. And if you wanted to, you know, you could brighten the internals even further using some masks. But to be honest, I wouldn't want to go too far with it. And I think that this is a nice mix of what the room really genuinely looks like, but kind of maximizing the feel of what this room is able to be. So a little bit of a different one this week. We've not done a lot of internal photography like this, actually photographing rooms and buildings and stuff like that. So that's an interesting one, especially for me. I actually really enjoy this kind of stuff. It's a bit of a different challenge to a lot of landscape or portrait or stuff like that we have looked at in the past. If you want to see more of this kind of stuff, or if there's anything else that you'd like to see, let me know in the comments, because I'm always keen to do the stuff that you guys want to see. Of course, there's a full list of all the kit that we use for these photos, for this video, all this stuff down in the description, so you can go and check that out for yourself. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well, because there's new content all the time. I'll see you in the next video, but until then, as always, thanks for watching.